Okay, I'm
It's
recording.
recording.
We're recording.
Hey.
Wonderful.
All right.
Well, since we started recording, thank you very much, Dublin Art League and David, for such a beautiful introduction, and for all our guests, welcome. I'm super excited to share my work and tell a little bit about my story. I would like to share my PowerPoint. And I think it would be Q&A we'll have at the end, but I think throughout the slides, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, because the slides are so different and it will be easy to get lost. So I think it will help if you have not very long question throughout the slides. Feel free to ask me. Okay, hold on. Okay. Just a second. Okay, I'm sharing the screen right now. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, my name is Fatima Taylor, or Fatima Taylor. Most of our artists know me as Fatima Azimova is my maiden name. So I am from country Uzbekistan. If you look at the map, the Uzbekistan is under red color. So Uzbekistan is a former USSR republic, and I grew up in the Soviet Union. So the geographic location of the country, you can see it's all the way south of USSR. It's a hot climate. Uzbekistan sometimes can be snowy, cold weather, but most of the time it's very hot and very dry. Probably comparable to maybe Texas, although it's a slightly different level. So Tashkent is the capital for Uzbekistan. That's where I grew up, spent all my childhood. I was born in such a diverse, multicultural family. My mother is half Armenian, half Russian. My father was half Uzbek, half Tatar. So ever since childhood, I heard 4 languages at least, and we spoke different languages. We ate different food, and we listened to different music. So that diversity, cultural diversity, played such an important role in my not only artistic development, in my growing up. So, and honestly, Tashkent is extremely multicultural city, has always been. You'll see Korean language and Chinese and Russian. So it's one of a kind, not as the entire country of Uzbekistan, but Tashkent in particular. It's about 2.5 million population city. And growing up in a city, me as a young artist, music theater and galleries and shows, it was all accessible and it was part of my everyday life. It all started with me being a young little artist. Honestly, I don't remember when I didn't draw or didn't paint. I think since I was able to hold pencil or pen or anything to scratch with, I began drawing and scratching and painting. As my mother recalled, the walls in our apartment were completely covered with drawings, and you can easily tell how tall I was by the height of the scratching on the walls. I have a twin sister. Her name is Zura, and although we are fraternal twins, we're very different. And unfortunately, she's not an artist; she's a doctor. So it's amazing how we chose completely different interests in life. In fact, I am the only artist in my family somehow.
So you got the harder of the 2 degrees to get.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. I think art chose me. I didn't really ever had a question, who do I want to be? Like I never asked myself. It was always there. Although all my childhood, I think because of a city, I've been exposed to different dance and music and not so much sport though, but sewing and doing macrame and all kinds of other activities. Very busy and active childhood, I have to say. I do have a few drawings from my childhood, thankfully to my mother who saved for me, and I'm very thankful for that. So this is age 9, about 8 or 9.
Wow.
I've been always drawn to graphite pencil and colored pencils. And nature has always been my inspiration, flowers and bugs and butterflies. Every time I had a chance to go outside, I would, pay attention to. I didn't have a camera back then, but I could bring my sketchbook and just draw outside. Yeah, drawing is a way of not only expressing myself, but learning about the world. And it's a way of thinking and processing. So that was colored pencil, and this one is actually India ink, and sort of like a feather sharp tool. I apologize for the spots. I think I ate right after I completed this drawing. Not to go too far, and but I am thankful that my mother preserved some of the drawings, and I don't think it's completed, but yeah. And so in this presentation, I will be talking about the source of my inspiration, the cultural influence. And I think the important role was not only the culture and the family language I grew up, but exposure to the museums and galleries and those fantastic museums. And of course, Russia itself, the country is rich, full of cultural history, and the artistic school, phenomenal school, fantastic artists. So landscapers were, and one of them was Ivan Ivazovsky. And actually looking at this seascape, it reminds me how many books I've had. And I began exploring those masters by copying. Even early on, at the age of 9 and 10, I had this incredible desire of, you know, painting like that. And I had this hunger of mimicking. Of course, I could not use oil at that early age. I was only using simple basic media, watercolor and ink, and sometimes even pencil. But desire to mimic the strokes and the composition was there. Of course, yeah, and that was another one a little bit later on at age 11. Cultural influence and so I grew up in Soviet Union culture. Of course, the Soviet propaganda was fantastic posters and artworks all over, everywhere in the city you'll see. It played an important role as well. I couldn't always understand the meaning, the political meaning behind, but what I could see and appreciate as a strong compositional sense, the language of colors and elements that were really expressing some ideas, and I could appreciate as a young artist. For me, that was impressive. I was collecting stamps, postal stamps, and to me, each little stamp was a work of art, and that was the beginning of my my personal collection. Unfortunately, I don't have any. I did not save any, but later on, you'll see how it influenced some of my works. Probably most of you guys know some of the elements of iconography, Soviet iconography, the hammer and sickle, famous hammer and sickle representing the union between farmers and workers. The hammer represents workers and the sickle represents farmers. This element was everywhere, practically in flag and state emblem, artworks, and schools anywhere you go. So you also be able to see in some of my works. What interesting, I grew up in Soviet Union, and I consider myself lucky because by the time the Soviet Union broke in 1991, which Uzbekistan and many other republics became independent, I was 17 years old and I witnessed the process. So here we go. I was during the Soviet Union, then I witnessed the breaking of the Union and afterwards. So it was a quite transition. And although honestly, it's only when I came to United States, being as a 27 years old adult, looking back and appreciating the process itself and the historical revolution. Because while the perestroika, I think most of us were just surviving, trying to survive, and we really couldn't worry about, and actually pay attention to the details. So immigrating to the United States in 2001, I began constructing some of the sketches and drawings and post, although I don't consider my work as a political. Perhaps this sketch is probably the most political. you'll see a finger painting with acrylic, but it's actually supposed to be sort of like a blood prints, fingerprints, and you have those dark headless figures, probably representing the people of the Soviet Union. It is a collage fingerprinting on paper. And then we'll see a little study watercolor sketch of me as a pioneer, a young pioneer. Pioneer is a youth organization in the entire former Soviet Union, not only in Uzbekistan, in Russia, of course. It's comparable to the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, where they teach you the moral codes and values, but of course, a little bit of a political platform to be ready for the maybe career in the communistic party in the future. So, and so the work was completed in the United States about 10 years ago. And here you go, you can see the hammer and sickle and the star and red color. Of course, red color is very symbolical, very patriotic, the color of a flag of the Soviet Union. But somehow now looking back, actually, there's some reflection of American culture as well, because star in the red color, I recognize that. Here's me portrait. I was working on my portrait. Of course, it's a self-portrait using black and white photographs, and many members of audience asking me, why am I bald here? I look like a Gorbachev with this stain, but because I guess my parents, for some reason, thought shaving a head of a little child will produce much better, thicker hair quality. So I don't know. I guess I have to ask my mom now. But a lot of my childhood photographs, I don't even have a hair. So, and I really like the boldness of it. It has this character, a little bit of character in a little girl. So those portraits were part of an exhibit called Generation that took place in Shawnee State University. And this exhibit, I really just worked on the character and the portraiture and the transition, cultural transition from the Soviet child to this multicultural identity and to American, where I also included not only myself, but my family members, my children. Yeah. As I mentioned before, I've been collecting stamps, postal stamps, and to me, they were source of my inspiration. I really appreciated the graphics. I mean, the Soviet culture had a lot of artists as a treasure, and I really appreciate their constructivism, of course, early Soviet culture. And some of the stamps I was enlarging and printing. So this work is actually mixed media. It's acrylic portrait and collage. Those stamps that you see, they're not real stamps. They're enlarged prints glued to the surface. You can also see Russian writing in between on the sides. The Russian writing is a lyric to the song, Let It Always Be a Sunshine. It was my favorite song in my childhood that I used to sing. I never had a voice, but I always loved to sing. And this song was about the peace and a little girl, a little boy singing to the mother, let it always be sunshine. So for some reason, it really touched me, and I decided to add the lyrics to the piece. And this is the photograph that I've worked in. I apologize. I don't have too many photographs saved, didn't have a camera. And I remember we had a neighbor who was a decent photographer, and that was the only hope for us to take any photographs. So it's amazing how today everyone is a photographer, and it's so easy and so accessible. But I guess in late 70s, it was not as easy. So Uzbekistan, I mean, it's difficult to describe the culture using just a few sentences, but if you think about the biggest symbol of Uzbekistan, the sunshine, beautiful climate, But probably the biggest symbol of Uzbekistan is white cotton. They call it white gold. The climate is ideal, perfect because of lack of rain, humidity, the sunshine is perfect to grow it. And for many families in Uzbekistan, they associate, and it is part of the emblem, part of the culture, of course. And in during the Soviet Union, I remember every high school students, it was like a mandatory. You would have to go minimum 2, sometimes even 3 weeks in the fall to collect cotton. So it's a free labor of students and giving to back to the community. It was quite interesting experience. We lived in barracks, was very minimum uh, basic needs like a water and very basic shower, but it was kind of cold as well, but it was interesting experience. So thinking about the symbols like cotton and white gold, I was utilizing in some of the works, especially in the portrait of my grandmother, whose name was also Fatima, Fatima Azimova. She died when I was 12 years old. Although I was very young, but I remember her. And this portrait was done mostly based on memories and a little bit of on a photograph that I've had. I depicted my grandmother, Fatima, as a cotton collector. And I chose a very minimalistic palette just to make emphasis on this graphic presence and the lines of her silk dress. The silk is a very well known Uzbek silk Hon Atlas. The pattern of silk is kind of mimicking with the pattern of the flower of cotton. I remember her eyes and very dark face, because not because of the tone of the skin, but because it burned on the sun. And I remember her hands and wrinkles. It's amazing how at 12 years old, I would appreciate that kind of beauty of age. It was just something, I guess today looking back, unexpected, but this portrait is very dear to me, and I exhibited this work many times. I also have a portrait of my grandfather, who I never met, unfortunately. But I had a photograph, and I mostly imagined him as being this very masculine and robust, and this very severe face, not even smiling. So I've had a few sketches done, and this is the final work of my grandfather. I call it Aksakal. Actually, the word Aksakal means an older man in Middle Asia. Drawings has always been my favorite process. I love pen, ink, and dry brush, and sometimes pencils and pastels, and every media I can possibly have my hands on. So I think most of you guys are artists, so you understand how it's the way we think, right? We draw, we think. The majority of my work's about portraiture, but sometimes I do still lifes. The still life was inspired by the 19th century fabric Suzanne. Suzanne is a hand embroidery. I had this fabric. It was a gift of my friend, Olga, and I really love this fabric. So actually, I brought this fabric to my students in my high in university class, and we set up a still life, and I really loved. So I was inspired by that. So some of my drawings, although I want to combine completed works with some study sketch, because plein air painting and drawing of nature is an important part as well. Very therapeutic. So I love going to the parks and outside in nature and just forget about the world and sit somewhere and just love the trees and views and have some little therapy time. So in drawings, I explore different techniques of using every possible method and teaching art for students, for professional, for art, fine art students and non-art students. I learned that one of the most accessible technique is frottage, where you don't really necessarily have to have skills of drafting, but you can utilize by exploring the texture of the surface. This technique has been known for probably over 100 years, but mostly perfected by Max Ernst, a German surrealist. The technique called frottage. Frottage is technique basically copying the texture. I'm sure you guys all have done copying the texture of coins in childhood. But if you research online, you'll see how some artists really advanced this method. And so my students and I were doing some projects, and this was an example of me exploring a portrait of my friend. His name is Todd Reynolds. He's an artist as well. And after the drawing, I actually painted a portrait. I love human profiles, absolutely adore. So sometimes I find myself staring at people's noses and chins and ears, keep forgetting, but so I always loved his profile and I decided to paint him. In this presentation, you will see lots of images of my son. This is my oldest son, Max. I have two boys, I have two on my own and two stepsons. Max has been my favorite model because he was very accessible and always there and willing to pose and taking photographs, so and free, most important. So I used them a lot. Silence within, that was just a study sketch for the painting. I used dry brush on tone paper. This is actually a portrait of Max Ernst, the German surrealist artist who was perfecting frottage technique. I've always been drawn to black and white images, beginning from simple drawing sketching to the acrylic and oil painting, something about black and white, the contrast. I think every artist went through this phase of black and white. And nature, of course, is always my focal point of my interest. Animal life and combination of it. And I found myself drawing to this interesting, unexplained, crazy little sketches and drawings. Later on, I understood why. But at this point, actually, this was one of the largest canvas. It's about 5 feet, if not larger, almost like a mini mural. I no longer have this work. About 8 years ago, I took classes of silver gelatin print, actually film photography. And I was blown away by the creative process. I spent hours and hours in the dark room working with chemicals and utilizing those and actually experimented, lots of experiments and, with negatives and how much all the timing and different ways of reinventing the process. So I was extremely happy. The only difficulties with silver gelatin for me was not ability to use in a household environment due to the chemicals. You can't really expose it. So that was the only problem and issue. But I love silver gelatin print. It's black and white. And I don't think I've ever exhibited my photography anywhere. Probably not too many people even know that I've done a lot of photography. I keep tons of photographs at home, just my personal collection. And this is a portrait of my son, Max Chernyshov. So I took my camera everywhere, my Kodak camera everywhere I go. And American soil, I have to say, is such a beautiful element to me as an immigrant in the United States. I absolutely love the richness and the vastness of this country and appreciate the nature and the differences between each state and climate. But soil has something special to me. I've been drawing to the beauty of and simplicity. So I have tons of photographs of just dry cracks. Again, it's a silver gelatin print, black and white photographs on printed on Ilford paper. And sometimes I combine negatives together, creating this interesting collage, like a digitally Photoshop. It's not a Photoshop, it's just two negatives combined together. Again, portrait of Max, silver gelatin print. Later on, I experimented with mixed media using silver gelatin print. But going back to American soil, I've also began painting using the soil as a primary media, the only media. Afterwards, you can spray fixative to kind of secure the soil to the surface, and depends on the surface what you work on, the support. This is actually a gesso panel. It has a little bit of toothy surface that actually soil can be touched, but soil is surprisingly very colorful. Depends on geographical location, and it's very beautiful, interesting to work with. So I've done a few different portraits, but this one I'm quite happy with. Portrait of American President Rutherford Hayes. Sorry. I think, repeat again, as an immigrant in the United States, I think I value so much the priceless material. And to me, it was a very special way to kind of, it's not a dirt, it's not a mud, it's that valuable media that probably go beyond just a muddy paint. And this is a work in progress, starting with very light. So working with soil, it's kind of delicate and it's not as sticky as acrylic or oil. So you have to apply in layers, wait till it's completely dried and carefully apply another layers. And sometimes you may use fixative in between layers that will be see-through, kind of clear, but it will help to secure the mud sticking to the soil, sticking to the surface, and actually develop the depth and more tonal value if you need. If you have any questions about any works right now, feel free to ask.
Well, I was actually wondering, this is Robbie, how do you apply the mud? What do you use to apply it? Do you make a stick out of mud, like a charcoal, or do you dip something into liquid mud? Well,
so I had a small glass jars, a few of them, very small, and I went to different locations of, garden and collected different samples. And each had a slightly different particles, consistency, different color, different texture. And the only thing I did, adding a little bit of water to make it creamy, to make very well mixed soil, almost like not a paste, but it's like sour cream consistency. So water and soil, that's it. And using brushes you would use, probably avoid using very soft brush. You would use something, I use synthetic brushes, like for acrylic. And actually it was working very well. Again, you may be able to spray with a fixative in between the layers, let it dry completely before you apply another layer. It will help you to build. It's a very similar process to as if you work with a pastel. Pastel is very crunchy and flaky, but if you use fixative like Monet did, it secures the layer and you can build a layer on top of layer. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is another experiment with silver gelatin print. I love gold. I love gilding. I love and the portrait of Max, his profile, and I use a little bit of gold gilding, but actually it's sort of like a gold ink, a liquid paint. I forgot the name of that, and also a little bit of copper as well. I don't think I show this work anywhere. So some of my photographs, the first time I ever brought to the surface. This work was sold many years ago. It is actually a fragment of a painting, portrait of my youngest son, Nicholas Atkins. And I used gold leaf and acrylic. I used white acrylic, but the chemical reaction using gold and white acrylic turned into blue for some reason. But I was very happy because Nicholas has blue eyes and naturally turned into exactly the way he looked. And this is Nicholas when he was very young. neither of my boys are actually artists. They don't have any interest in art, surprisingly. And when Nick was young, at this age, he was fascinated with astronomy, planets, and I wanted to depict him holding a globe, was holding the entire universe. Of course, for me, he was the universe. And I'm kind of inspired by the Christian iconography, the icon painting, the gold gilding and this light and glazing. So I did apply, I used acrylic, but I did use a method of glazing when you apply very thin layers on the surface. And working with acrylic panels and boards, actually, it allows you to apply this approach of glazing.
Excuse me, Fatima,
Yes.
was it actual gold leaf or was it a gold paint of some sort, a gold glaze?
It's a fake gold leaf. Now, there are some of the works I use real silver leaf. You can order online. You can actually order real gold as well. Just the gold was a little pricey. So everywhere you see the gold leaf, it's imitation of a real gold. So it's not 22 karat gold, but the silver actually is a real thin layer of a silver.
Was it an oil-based gold paint?
It wasn't a paint. No, I'm sorry. It was a leafing. So it's a very thin, sort of like a paper-like.
Oh,
In
right.
order to attach, you have to use adhesive. You can buy adhesive as in a spray or liquid. Sometimes they have like a marker. So it's a very sticky substance that you apply to the surface prior to attaching the gold leaf. There are tons of methods of using gold leaf. And then you apply this very light leaf, whether it's a imitation or real, but it's the same exact method. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This portrait of Mccall watercolor ink on canvas. There's some canvases that are designed specifically for water-based media. They are very gentle and thin, and they actually allow you. The only thing you have to remember working with canvas and watercolor, you have to use fixative at the end to secure the paint, and that will prevent from UV light and humidity, and you don't have to use a glass frame as well. I love watercolor, and I was fascinated discovering this canvas that is designed for watercolor and ink. This is a portrait of Mccall, a fantastic lady who lives in Portsmouth. I've met her many years ago, and I hope she's still alive. When I met her, she was 105, turning 106. Was a fascinating biography, being involved with the art community, and I was surprised that she hadn't had her portrait painted. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to paint her. So amazing personality. I was just drawn by her sense of humor and life, and just, so it was a gift to Alma from me. Portrait of my stepfather, Bob Teeters. Both of my boys, I have so many portraits of my boys. I promise I won't show too much, but some of them, I know them so well. And I believe out of all my works, portraits of my kids are the most successful. Just somehow they always end up, maybe because I love them so much. Portrait of my mother. Actually, I started with ink, but I finished with acrylic on board. This is actually mural, was made on the canvas that you can roll. It was made for the garden show. I do paint portraits and landscapes, and sometimes I do commission work, murals. I had an opportunity to work with Robert Deffer in Portsmouth, Ohio, fantastic artist and my friend. And actually, I was working with him the first year I immigrated to the United States on Portsmouth flood wall, helping him working on details and some of the elements. And in fact, I think it was 5 years ago, we repainted one wall as well. So it was wonderful opportunity to work with such a big artist. And so there's quite a few murals, residential, some of them, one in restaurant and a couple yeah, I have some experience working with murals. Portrait of my son, Max, again, mixed media. I use, this is a real silver. It's applying the same method, the same technique, but used with real silver. I ordered online. And here it is acrylic, but I use very fine brush. It kind of looks like a marker, but it's not a marker, it's just a fine brush. Some of my works very linear. I think it's because of my passion toward drawing, and it's just sometimes goes beyond. I start with a wider brush, but I end up taking on small details and just hovering over some microscopical details. Portrait of Francis Bacon, watercolor ink on panel. A lot of my works I donated, and if I don't have the particular information about the size, I can't really, I don't have it and restored. But this work was also donated. So was this portrait of Lucian Freud, ink on gesso board. I love experimenting with a different paper, a different surface, and different support. Sometimes something very unexpected, like the poster board. You can find poster board in Walmart, dollar store, and it's very glossy, and you would never want to use that. But if you use watercolor and ink, you will be surprised what you can do with using this method. So this one is particularly gridded poster board, and I was just very intrigued by the way it doesn't absorb the paint, yet leaves some kind of water muddy puddles that will dry quickly, leaving as it is. All you have to do is just spray fixative at the end to secure that, and you can frame it if you want. But this one done purely out of curiosity. I actually did this as a sample to show the students what you can use as an alternative. We work with watercolor. It was interesting to see how watercolor operates and performs on the different surfaces. So there was more like a study work. I do a lot of commission portraits, and sometimes I take pictures in the process and show the owner, future owner, how it's done and make a little video. So the client is fascinated by the process and to see how it actually builds. A portrait of Angie Glockner from Portsmouth, Ohio. Another of my passion is, could be commission, could be just my personal interest, study of 15th century, 16th century masters. Primarily Italian masters. I love Renaissance, everything about Renaissance. And ever since my mother and myself traveled to Italy, even before, I was obsessed with the museums of Italy and Vatican, just mind-blowing. When I came back, although this is original work that is actually located in London, but I was blown away by the work of Bronzino. I'm a lot of artists, but Bronzino was especially just absolutely mind-blowing. When I came back, I had this urge of copying anything of Bronzino just to have this possession, this hunger of having classical art in my household. And this painting actually caught my attention ever since childhood. I've always had this fascination, the complexity of this composition and just the colors, it's just phenomenal. So I painted this work, but I didn't complete it because, as you see, it's very hard to compare colors. The best way to do copy to complete copy is actually travel to the origin, to where the work is located, in order to compare to the true colors. And I tried twice. In fact, last year, my husband and I bought tickets to fly to London pre-COVID. And of course, COVID happened and we had to change our plans. And two works I was going to bring with me, the Venus by Bronzino, the Venus and Cupid, and of course, the Madonna by Bronzino, also located in London. And as you see, so the left is original, the right is a copy that is also not completely finished. I still need to add some shadows, a little bit of color adjustment. Again, I was hoping to set up, and I Was even invited by the museum, National Gallery, and they sent me invitation, not invitation, but permission and asking me, but didn't work. Hopefully sometime in the future. Usually master copy is very well known for students, and I mean, every fine art student goes through this process. But I believe you never stop learning. It's not just for the students. I myself have a great passion toward, I think working like masters help you to just put your mind in a different settings, lets you think in a different way. It's something very unexpected. You have tons of decisions that you make that normally you would not. So for me, I really enjoy copying masters, stealing their secrets, discovering them. And Bronzina, Venus, I actually was using, I study a lot about the pigments and what to use and glazing. And I mean, literally using every book I can find possibly to understand who was Bronzina, the artist, this fascinating personality, and trying to use the glazing process the way he did. With this work, I actually experimented with water-based oil. I have to say I was blown away. Water-based oil sounds impossible. It's a little bit more expensive than the other oil, but it is absolutely incredible because, first of all, it's non-toxic. It does not produce any fumes, very safe. You just have to adjust a different way of mixing, but it's absolutely incredible. Pigments are very strong, performs, it does beautiful work. So if you haven't used water-based oil, I strongly recommend to use it.
Fatima, do you just add water to make
Right.
it how about a transparent glaze? What do you use with it?
So this one, I did not use glazing, did not. This one is just water.
Wow.
Yes. You will be surprised how it doesn't make sense. Water and oil do not mix, but somehow they do. The water-based oil, you can work with real oil. Once you turn into regular oil, you can't go back to water. You have to use solvent or other chemicals to blend, to mix. But if you stay just to water-based, you use water as a vehicle, as a solvent, and that's it. Once it's completely dry, and by the way, it dries a little bit faster than the other oil, you can use the same fixative and secure and spray, glossy, non-glossy, it's up to you. But it really does a magic because the viscosity and the oiliness is still there. All the positive qualities of oil is still there, and everything that is not positive, the danger of oil paint, the toxicity is not there. So it's like revolutionary medium. And of course, I would strongly advise to buy better brand, to invest in a better brand. Yeah.
Fatima, is that how you acknowledge that it's a copy of the artist? You say after and the artist's name?
Yes, as far as I know, after, yes. And as far as I know, you do not sign the copy. You can sign the back of a canvas. And once you complete your work, you go to the museum. If you work with the original at the museum will actually stamp your work, validating that this copy was done under or with not supervised, but next to the original. So it gives some credit and some perhaps value, of course, monetary value and some kind of validation. Yeah. I can't sell prints, of course. I don't have rights for that.
Okay.
I can show it. Ever since my childhood, I've been always doodling. I always had some small sketchbooks, big sketchbooks. I remember drawing on anything, I think even in toilet paper, anything, whatever is possible to draw. And sometimes I used ink as a monotype, just an accidental splash in some prints, and then look for what I see. It's just like a game turned into. And I had tons of drawings. Some of them left, some of them I collected, and just a few of them to show you guys. And some of them are very abstract, surprising. Most of them, my students don't even know that I have abstract work, but I actually do. But then I turn them into something realistic, the tree, flowers, birds. But I do have a lot of crazy drawings that really kind of help me to open the door to this pure imagination and just get lost into this craziness. I included these 2 posters that I designed being in the Ohio Art League. It was just the concept design for the poster. Of course, we did not use them, but I really liked some of the ideas. This was done for the Ohio Art League fundraiser, One Night Crazy Hat. I used color pen and pencil. In the past, as a former fashion designer, I've done a lot of drawings, developing some ideas. There was some company in California that I was designing t-shirts and hats and some jewelry. So very interesting, very different experience. About 10 years ago, I was involved and still am part of a visionary art culture community in the United States. I discovered some artists that were completely mind-blowing. So when you think about visionary art, some people describe it as a fantastic realism, others say surrealism, magic realism, or visionary art, or cosmic art, or inspirational art. And actually, it is such a huge category. You can't really say it's hard to put your finger and point on. But to me, it is a door opening to your wildest imagination and a permission to accept everything and depict whatever you want and express yourself without any limitations. But of course, being in this community, visionary art, I've met so many artists that became an inspiration and such a vital resource. Unfortunately, not all of them have been promoted in the United States, and some of them are not even well known, but they're absolutely amazing. At the end of this presentation, I will include 3 links. And if anybody interested, I recommend to follow those links and discover maybe what you can find for yourself. Maybe you become part of this community. So some of the study sketch, a lot of my artworks, especially if I'm thinking about the complicated compositions, I start with the study composition, outline the elements, what I want to depict, and I show it often to my students, how the process works. And then once I figure out, and that doesn't always work that way. It's not always guaranteed, but often it kind of guides you and leads and helps you to understand what is it you're trying to message about. And this is a poster for the upcoming Visionary Artist exhibit that's going to be in Washington. And yeah, we have a fantastic group of artists. I'm so proud to have those artists and their work exhibited next to mine, especially Bridget Marlin, this lady, and those artists from all over the world. When I study glazing technique, Bridget Marlin has she has quite a few books about glazing technique painting, especially Mish technique. And Ernst Fuchs, of course, Otto Rapp, and a lot of other artists. This is the work that was accepted for this show. I apologize for lower quality resolution. For some reason, my camera was not cooperating with me. But the name of this work is A Sacred Garden. Portrait of this spiritual entity actually is my husband's portrait, with a little bit of adjustment. And the glowing light, of course, was inspired by my husband. Sea Goddess acrylic on canvas, actually very old painting. Over 10 years ago, let me see, 2005. Some of the work you see is Azimova. And in fact, if you Google my name, you will see more work under Azimova than Taylor. I don't even know where this painting is. It was sold many, many years ago. But I think it was beginning of me discovering visionary art. And this is another example of a study composition prior to painting. So I usually draw on smaller size and sometimes enlarge on the canvas. Sometimes I use part of the elements, something that I really like, and change the others. Lady with Bird, acrylic on panel. This work has a history because it's based on my memory from childhood. One day, my mother opened the door, and I think I heard a knock, and there was a bird sitting on her head. And we tried many things to take this bird down. It just would not leave her head. It would fly away for a minute, then come back again. So in my memory, I remember this vivid image of mother's profile and the bird stuck to her head. Of course, this is not my mother. It's just the image of this a beautiful lady wearing mask, elegant with very elongated. Actually, I was inspired by more Raphael type of woman. But the story was remembered from the childhood. And if you look carefully, you will see that there's actually no bird on top of a head. The bird was there and flew away. The only outline, a contour line left from the bird is an empty space. Kind of remind me of perhaps my childhood memories that have left some perhaps impact. This is Invisible Man, a portrait of my former student from Shawnee State University. Acrylic on board. Again, you see those linear quality. It is a painting, yet in some way it is a drawing because every single line was done by very fine, small brush of acrylic. Conception of the Mind, oil on canvas. I also produced this painting many years ago, and it's actually a self-portrait of my profile on the left side, and mostly my spiritual portrait on the right side. This work became pretty popular in different shows. I've had this work exhibited in New York a few years ago in Visionary Alchemy by Society of Art Imagination. Again, I will include the link to Society of Art Imagination. They are located in New York City, but the artists that participate in these exhibits are from all over the world. And actually, you're welcome to explore and see maybe that's something interesting for you. They have amazing catalogs. This visionary art communities are just amazing. One of the catalogs by different organization, this yearbook. I think you can still buy this books online. Andromeda, oil on canvas. And the last work I would like to show you, portrait of my husband that I just recently completed. I used pencils on a large scale, and this is actually a study drawing for my upcoming oil painting. I will use water-based oil for this work. I hope I did not take too much time. I know we have limited time till 8:30. So if you guys would like to move on to, before we go to Q's and A's, and this 3 links to the websites of a visionary art community. Strongly advise you to check it out. Okay, and let's move on to questions and answers.
Fatima, in your last portrait of your husband, there was a lot of animal imagery. Were there specific symbols or reasons for the certain animals?
Yes, thank you for a wonderful question. Every single line has, to me, is a symbolical. So he is the focal point, the center of the composition. But I also wanted to show, because if up close, you can see it's a little bit of roughness, shows his personality. But Yet the color that I chose, everything is about showing his gentle side of his personality. The ego on the left, somehow the character reminds me of my husband, not just the profile, the severity of a character, and the eye and the way he looks, but something I can't even explain why. That boldness of the ego kind of associates with boldness of my husband's personality somehow. Elephant, yes, elephant to me is such a symbolic animal, and I see it for some reason associated with Paul. So those symbols are not some cultural symbols, but they're elements that particularly project or somehow relating in my mind to my husband. And the flamingo is actually a symbol for me, my personality, myself. I kind of associate a symbol of freedom. It's a beautiful bird, and I often use flamingo in my paintings. So I wanted to paint flamingo, kind of spiritual connection with my husband. The sunlight, the tree, money tree, and beautiful leaves, and of course the five leaf clover leaf. I found myself on the field, and I put it in between the books and dried, and I framed it in my house. So it is my house, and I treasure it as a symbol of luck and happiness. And my husband is partly Irish, so I thought kind of decorates his chest, shoulder very well. Yep.
Wonderful.
It's so well done. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I say something?
Yes, please,
Sure.
Kathy.
Okay, I'm kind of new at this. Fatima, I really enjoyed your presentation. Really, really enjoyed it. I don't think it's very easy to do this on this sort of scenario, and I think you did a really beautiful job. You spoke to us like we were sitting right next to you, and so I admire you for doing such a wonderful presentation. I like your artwork, and I loved your stories that you told tonight. And your artwork is just stunning. So I just wanted to say that I don't have a question, but I really did enjoy this presentation.
Thank you, Jackie. I really appreciate. It means a lot to me. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
I loved how in so many pieces, the more you look, the more you find. And it's just the depth of imagery and some of the repeated elements that you carry through. It's awesome.
Honey,
Yes, it is.
paper did you use for this colored pencil?
What pencils I use?
What paper?
I often use watercolor paper for pencil drawing, but I choose watercolor that is not as rough, has the smoothest watercolor surface, but it's pretty thick and pretty durable. And it's when you work with watercolor, pencils, I'm sorry, when you work with pencils, you know, again, just like with pastel and any other media, you apply in layers. So it has to be durable and strong enough to handle the layers. And as far as blending process itself can be pretty tough on the paper. You can use different medium, alcohol, from oil to all kinds of different media to blend. Any blending tool. So if you don't work with watercolor paper or something very heavy, at least 300 pounds density, then it's kind of tough. So yeah, I prefer to use watercolor paper.
And what kind of pencils?
Pencils, two different sets. My favorite, I discovered Derwent, Derwent, and Winsor & Newton. I just bought a set of Winsor & Newton pencil set. They're a little bit softer, but and I sharpen them often, but I'm pretty satisfied. Again, if you work with a blending tool, if you blend in between the layers in order to achieve the depth of color and the brightness, it's achievable, and you can really create interesting color variation and tonal value. So I'm pretty impressed with the modern with the art supplies that you can find today as far as the pigment and the strong pigments and pencils. But my recommendation would be the Durant.
Fatima, I'm absolutely blown away by your work. I really am. I'm also really fascinated by what I see as sort of a drive for experimentation in all that you are doing, and experimentation in material, in substance, in the work that you're presenting. And you really delve into some wonderful areas of art, and you turn them to just a beautiful form. And I think it's that sense of exploration that comes through to me in your work. It's just fascinating and wonderful. Congratulations. I'm really blown away.
Thank you, David. You're so right. My curiosity has no limitations. But I think really coming from my childhood, the background really helped me to accept the differences of different cultures and be curious more than perhaps judging or misunderstanding or criticizing. It's just the endless hunger and appetite for something new, learning and utilizing. And I mean, we all know art is everywhere around us. Everything is art. And the beauty is everywhere. It's just in our hands to really appreciate and learn how to utilize and be able to express. So I think the multicultural background helped me, but my personality, of course, the curiosity is. I graduated my school when I was 19 years old. I went to school earlier, finished my 4-year degree, and I was so young, and I don't think I fully appreciated the power of knowledge at that age. But later on, raising children, every chance I get to take a workshop, take a class, to learn something extra, it was such a hunger for that and utilizing. And I only wish I would have a second opportunity to go back to school and perhaps receive a second degree or something. But yeah, you're right. Curiosity is my key. Thanks, David.
Fatima, I consider myself very fortunate to have taken some lessons from you. You're such a generous instructor with your knowledge. I was wondering if you have any workshops coming up.
Good question.
And so great to hear from you and see you. Thank you so much for your compliment and kind words. I would love to have workshops. I'm always willing and absolutely ready. Yes, I would love that. We have to maybe think about what is the audience want to learn. We'll discuss
Sure.
options, and yes.
That would be great.
Thank you, Linda.
Could you put up the last slide with the websites?
Okay. Okay, hold on. Wait a minute. Oops. And you guys, if you have any questions later on, find me on Facebook and send me a message or question. I will answer any questions you have, or any link, or any questions about organizations or the websites. I would gladly help you out if I can.
I was fascinated with your painting with soils. I thought, in one way, it's probably a very ancient way of painting, but it's so just so interesting when you think of clay and the color that would be in there from different minerals. Or I wondered if you had ever gone to Georgia where they have the red soil. it's just, it was fascinating.
Yes, I have to be honest, United States is one of the most fascinating country. You guys don't even know how lucky you are to be born and have this accessibility to this wealth. It is just incredible. And I lived for many years in Southern Ohio, actually North Kentucky, but I did travel a lot, and I've been to Georgia. Back then I did not paint with soil, but I did take some classes of ceramic sculpture. I did some sculpture. So that love working with soil and clay was there. And yeah, and it's quite unusual. You wouldn't think, but oh, artists can paint with anything. There's been plenty of examples using all kinds of unexpected materials, but soil, why not? And yeah, surprising, why not many people use it? Especially using modern art supplies. We can find anything. If it doesn't stick, we can find something to make it stick. If it doesn't shine, we can make it shine. So there's so many ways of exploring that, but yeah.
Interesting.
Well, on behalf of the Dublin Area Art League, Fatima, let me thank you so much. A round of applause, a virtual round of applause.
Thank you, guys. I am happy for this opportunity to be connected with the art community, with the Dublin League. It is absolutely wonderful, especially in such a difficult time. I love to be connected to all of you, and it's just an important gesture for all of us to be connected and to help each other, to find inspiration and support each other every way we can. Yes, my pleasure, my pleasure. And please keep me informed for the upcoming exhibit. Like I said, I am sure I can be helpful in organizing. My experience with Ohio Art League will definitely makes me very confident and be helpful for you guys. So
Thank you.
count me in.
My special thanks to Linda Turvey for recommending Fatima tonight. Thank you. And just two more plugs, as Kathy mentioned. Jeff Stoller will be our guest speaker on February 18th, and Nathaniel Underwood will be our guest speaker on March 18th. Nathaniel is a teacher here in Columbus, and I strongly recommend you check out his website and please join us on March 18th.
What was his name again?
Nathaniel Underwood.
Okay.
Underwood.
Well, thank you all for being here tonight. It was a great turnout and fabulous information, and getting to hear Fatima, and we're a good group. You're all great people. Thank you for showing up tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Fatima. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Really
Fatima.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.